Does the name of Yeshua really appear on the floor of an ancient Judean synagogue? I've had several people ask me about a certain mosaic inscription found from the Susya synagogue in southern Judea, where we find the name Yeshua, spelled Yod, Shin, Vav, Ayin. We're going to look at that inscription along with several other parallel inscriptions from ancient Jewish synagogues, and we'll come to the conclusion that the name Yeshua here is not in any way talking about Yeshua of Nazareth. To provide context for the various synagogue inscriptions that we'll look at today, I want to show you on the map where they are located. Here you can see a Google Map satellite image of the land of Israel. Of course, up here is the Mediterranean Sea. Here we have the Sea of Galilee, and the Jordan River runs south to the Dead Sea. We're going to zoom in here, and Susya, which is the location of the synagogue that has the inscription, is in this area right here. And up just to the west is another location for an ancient Jewish synagogue, contemporaneous to the synagogue at Susya, is Eshtamoa. And we're going to look at an inscription from there as well, from the same time period. So I'm going to zoom back out again. That's the southern Judean hills. Then we're going to look up here to the northwestern corner of the Dead Sea to Jericho, which is this big green area here, Jericho. And in northwestern Jericho, there is a synagogue called the Na'aran Synagogue from the same time period. That we're going to look at an inscription from there. So we're going to have a little bit of southern Judea, a little bit here of the Jordan River Valley, towards the north end of the Dead Sea. But then we're going to go up into Galilee, up here west of the Sea of Galilee, to this area here, north of Nazareth, which is down here. Of course, this is what's called the Jezreel Valley here. But up here is the ancient synagogue of Tzipori, or Sepphoris. And we're going to look at inscriptions from each of these locations. So we have something from the north, or the Galilee, something from the Judean River Valley here in northwest Jericho. And then we're going to look at two synagogue inscriptions from here, from Susya and Eshtamoa. So that's just to give you an overview geographically of the dispersion of the specific features we're going to notice that these inscriptions share. Now, first we're going to look specifically at the Susya inscription that is in question here. And this is the one that actually contains the name Yeshua. I'll zoom in here so you can see it. It's here. It's Yod, Shin, Vav, Ayin. So we would write that, Yod, Shin, Vav, Ayin. If we put vowels, it would be like this, Yeshua, Yeshua. And that's the Aramaic form for Jesus. And so people have thought, this must be an ancient Messianic synagogue. Well, that's actually not the case here, as I'm going to show you today. What we're going to look at is the inscription as a whole. So we're going to look at it in context. Remember, the word itself has no meaning, only the meaning that is provided with the context. In the larger inscription here, sadly, it's broken off. This is a picture I took when I had the privilege of visiting Susya a few springs ago with some dear friends. It starts out Dalet. Now, this is in Aramaic. Dalet, Kaf, Yod, Resh, Nun, Lamed, Tet, Bet, Mayim, and I'll write this again. Nun, Chet, Mem, Hey. Then we have the name Yeshua, Yod, Shin, Vav, Ayin. I'm being a little bit sloppy here. And then we have the word Sahada. And then finally we have Menachama again. And then my picture, there's actually a word that begins with the letter Sin or Sheen over here, but then the mosaic is broken off. So we can't read it in its entirety. But we do know what this says. And the first word here is all right. And now this is Aramaic, so it's not Hebrew, although the script, of course, looks like Hebrew. It's dechirin. Dechirin is how we would vocalize it. In another inscription, we'll see this spelled fully, dalet, kaf, yod, resh, yod, nun. So the final in, plural ending, is not always given in the inscriptions, but sometimes it is. And then it says latav. Now tav, you might think that sounds like the Hebrew word tov, and you'd be correct. Here's our Hebrew word tov. And if you know, tov means good. So what it means to say dechirin letav is may they be remembered for good. May they be remembered for good. That's the core introductory phrase here. They be remembered as for good. And the dechirin is important because it's they. And we're going to see this in many instances of this formula, that the plural means that there's going to be a list of people subsequent to this introduction. Dechirin letav, and then we have the first name, which says Menachma Yeshua Sahada. Menachma Yeshua Sahada. And this continuing in an Aramaic. Menachma is an uncertain meaning. It could mean, as in some Hebrew translations of this, particularly at the site at Susya, is paraklet, which is just a Hebrew transliteration of the Greek parakletas, which means comforter. That was the first, back in the 70s or whenever they first discovered this synagogue and started going through and properly cleaning the inscriptions and taking note of them. That was the thought, that's what it meant. And then Yeshua is the name, and Sahada is the word for martyr. And so there are a few different scholars that have weighed in on what this menachma might mean. I prefer the Cal lexicon as a comprehensive Aramaic lexicon, which suggests that this is a passive. It's describing someone who has died. Menachma Yeshua Sahada, and they probably died as a martyr, Sahada. And then it continues and says Umenachma, that means another, and there was another person who died. And then their name started with a sheen or a seen, we don't know. And that's what we have here. But what people have sensationalized is they've taken this name Yeshua here, which certainly is the name Yeshua. There's no dispute about that. But have then run with this idea that this must be a Messianic synagogue from the 5th century. So just to clarify, we're looking at synagogue remains. All the inscriptions that I'll show you today come from the 5th, 6th, 7th century common era. So a few hundred years after the destruction of the temple. Another inscription from Susya here is another picture that's hard to read. It's taken at an angle. You see it's much more complete and given a more central place than the one we just looked at here. Whereas the one with the name Yeshua, is at the very edge of a room of the narthex. Here, this is in a more open space, and it's actually in Hebrew, but it has the same thing. It's zakul, which means remembered, letova, remembered for good. And then it says, kedushat Mari Rabbi Isi HaKohen HaMekuvad. What that means is, may the goodness, or may he be remembered for goodness, the Holy One, Mari, Rabbi, my master, my teacher, Isi HaKohen, the honorable, etc. It's quite a detailed inscription about the making of the synagogue and the mosaic, and it mentions his son, who is a scribe. It says he is Yochanan HaKohen HaSofer. So this is Yod Chet. Let's see here. Let's see. If we take, sorry. Here it is. It's Yod, Vav, Chet, Nun, Nun. Yochanan, He, Kaf, He, Nun, HaKohen, He, Samek, Vav, Pe, Resh. Yochanan, HaKohen HaSofer. And sometimes these are a little bit disorienting because the letters blend together. At the very end, also, we have this beautiful passage that says, Shalom al Yisrael. Amen. Peace upon Israel. Amen. So the synagogue at Susya has more than one inscription. There are others, too, that have the Dekir formula at the same synagogue. There's no reason to go over those. Now, here's one from Eshtamoa. So I showed you where Susya was in the southern Judea hills. There's one in Eshtamoa as well, just a close neighbor synagogue to the west. And we have this inscription here, Dekir Letav, also in Aramaic, Dalet, Kaf, Yod, Resh, Letav, and it says, Laser Kahana. The aleph is broken off. But basically what this says is, I'll write it again up here, Dekir Letav, remembered for good. Or may he be remembered for good. And then it says Lazer, which is short for Eleazar, most likely, kind of where we get the name Lazarus. And then it says Kahana, the Cohen. Now, this is in Aramaic. Now, the Dekir doesn't mean the person has died. It could be a memorial for just someone who was a donor to build the synagogue or contributed materials or labor or artistic skill. But that's all, again, why we think that Menachma, back here, in the two names listed here, Dechirin, may they be remembered for good, has to do with the memory of someone who has died rather than someone who is still part of the community but has their name, because of their contributions, inscribed in the mosaic. Okay, now we're going to go all the way up to Galilee. These are inscriptions from the Sephirah synagogue. And again, there's more than what I'm sharing here. I think it might be that my yellow will show up a little better here. Here we have Dekir, Letav, so the same formula, remembered for good. And then it says Yudan bar Yitzchak. So I'm going to zoom in even more here. Yod Vav Dalet Nun Beit Resh. That's bar Yitzchak. Yod Tzadi Chet Kuf. And then HaKohen. And then it says Frigri Barat. Amen, amen. It means or Barate, his daughter. So here again, we have Yudan bar Yitzchak HaKohen. May he be remembered for good. This is up in Galilee. And in the same synagogue floor, we have a plural here, Dechirin, like we had in Susya. But we don't have the yod. It's spelled defectively. Dechirin Letav. Lamed Tet Bet. Dechir Letav. And then it says Tanchum Bar Yudan, etc. And has two names here. So may they be remembered for good. Isn't that nice? And And then finally, we go back to the synagogue Na'aran, which is near Jericho. And we have, this is quite damaged, but we see here at the very top, what we can make out is this Dalet, Dechir, Letav. And then it says the name Benjamin here, Binyamin, Bet, Yod Nun, Yod Mem, Yod Nun Sofit. And it says Parnasah. Parnasah, that means he was some sort of benefactor. And then it looks like this is Bar, Yosa, like son of Yosa. Now I'm going by the scholarly official transcription, but it looks just from this picture, that could be Ger, but I don't know that would make sense. But anyway, oops, I erased the noon for Benjamin. It says, may Benjamin, the Parnasah for this community, be remembered for good. And then right below it, we see the plural, Dechirin. Now the Dalet is missing, but we know it's Kof, Yod, Resh, Yod, Nun. There's our full spelling, Malay, Dechirin, Letav, Lamed, Tet, Bet. And then, so may they be remembered for good. Again, plural, just like we saw in Susya, where the first name listed was Yeshua, Sahada. Here we have Kol man, everyone who, mitchazak is who donated, ve yahav, and gave, and then it goes on to the as a blessing of memory for those who contributed to the synagogue. We have one more picture that's in color from the Na'aran synagogue here. And this one's unique from these others because we either had masculine, singular, Dechir, Letav, may he be remembered for good, or Dechirin, Letav, masculine. Here we have a unique one because it's feminine. It's Dechira, Dalet. Well, here, let me go back to a black ink color here. Dalet, Kaf, Yod, Resh, Hey. And I like this one because it's in color. Dechira Letav. May she be remembered for good. And then it has her name, that she's a son of a scribe, or Safra. And then it says, Itchazeket Bahadin Atara Kadisha. Amen. That she volunteered or donated, probably more likely, to the building of this holy place. So, Dechira, Letav, we say, we can see all these examples together. So, just to recap, we have the form, Dechir, Letav, may he be remembered for good. Then we have Dechirin, sometimes Dechirin without the Yod, but it's still Dechirin Letav. And then we just saw in Na'aran synagogue, northwest of Jericho, we have a unique one, Dechira Letav, and it's talking specifically about a woman. And this is a conventional mosaic formula for someone who has contributed in some manner, financially or by skill, or maybe they serve as a teacher or a scribe to that community, and their names are marked in the actual building structure through this beautiful mosaic work. All these mosaics were done probably in the 5th or 6th century Common Era. And we noticed that back to the Susya inscription, the word Menachma, Yeshua, Sahada, is unique from the others. It's part of a list where there's a second person listed. Sadly, their name's broken off as a Menachma. And the context suggests that this is a list of people who had died, and that these other inscriptions most likely existed while the names of the people recorded in them were still alive and active participants in that community. So again, we looked at synagogues. So if we zoom out here again, we looked at synagogues from ancient Susya here in the southern Judean hills and Eshtamoa. We went all the way to the north and we looked at synagogue in Tzipuri or Sepphoris in the Galilee. And then we finished and we came all the way back down here to the southern Jordan River Valley. This is Jericho more largely, and up into the northwest is this ancient synagogue, Na'aran. There are other inscriptions from ancient synagogues that also have the formula of Dechir Letav or Dechirin Letav, may they be remembered for good. It's a very signature, if you will, formula for Jewish mosaic inscriptions in the 5th and 6th centuries Common Era. The name Yeshua, while it is the Aramaic word Yud, Shin, Vav, Ayin, found in the Susya synagogue, is not at all related to Jesus of Nazareth or mentioning Jesus of Nazareth. So anybody who's telling you that is either completely ignorant and they're just a fool, or they are literally trying to lie and deceive. So take that as a warning and as helpful information. Shalom.